Hey everyone, it's Matt here with Nightrun Studio, and welcome back to the Metroidvania tutorial series. So far in this series, we've got our player set up with a bunch of different states and the ability to collect and cast different magic spells. I'd like to add a couple of more states to our player, including a wall jump and wall slide. That said, I've been receiving questions from people over the last few weeks, and I'd like to just take a video to optimize what we've already got by tweaking some values, but also doing a couple of small code fixes to get things working better. That's where we're headed in this video. Let's get started. Alright, so fix number one. When we slide, the player is often going down into the ground, which looks a little funny. This is just happening because we changed the size and position of the collider while sliding, which we want to do. However, I currently just have it set a little too high, so by going into our slider settings, we can actually just change it to -1.3 instead of 1.1, and that does the trick for me. You might need to experiment with other numbers to get yours just right. Alright, the next issue we're dealing with is when the player jumps and clips downward through the ground. It's a little hard to reproduce, so I'm not actually gonna try here. That said, a number of people have reported that their player goes through the ground when landing. The easiest fix for this is to go to your rigid body and change collision detection from discrete to continuous. This is a little more costly, but we're just doing it for the player, and it's pretty common practice. Now he'll check constantly for ground, and that should keep him from clipping through the ground. Alright, the next issue is actually one we're going to make a little change in our code for, and it's to do with our jumping. There is currently the ability to jump buffer the moment you hit the air, so if you double tap quickly, you'll jump again immediately when you hit the ground, and obviously this isn't something that we want. This part's actually a really easy fix. If we open up our player script, we can scroll all the way to the bottom where we take in our jump press. Currently, anytime we press it, we store that jump being pressed, and we don't want to do that while we're in the air, so we'll just add an if statement here. So, if we are grounded, we'll now allow ourselves to take in that jump press. Now any attempt to press jump while we're in the air will just get ignored. When we get back in the game, you'll see that that's working nicely. There's no more double jump happening, and we have to actually be on the ground to do our second jump. That said, we have a problem where if we get down in a crouch position and we hit jump, this happens. We end up in this strange sort of a jump thing, and really we shouldn't be able to jump at all if there's a ceiling above us. Again, this is an easy fix. In our onJump method, we're just going to make sure that if we are grounded and there is no ceiling, so we'll use not the negative check here, check for ceiling. Now if we go up, you'll remember that our check for ceiling just casts an overlap circle around our player that looks to see if there is any ceiling layer within that. Now only if that returns false and we're on the ground will we be able to jump. Now in the game, when we get under a ceiling, we're no longer able to jump as it detects a ceiling. However, there is a little problem, and this will especially affect you if you have slanted ceilings like I do. As you go up, the player thinks there's room to stand when there isn't, and he can get stuck in the wall or even jump into it in some cases. Now if we look at our player while in scene view and turn on our gizmos, you can see our head check here is indeed catching the ceiling, which is why it works. However, as he leaves, the slanted ceiling here slowly makes its way out of that circle, causing him to think he can stand up even though he can't. This part's pretty easy to fix. We can just make our head check larger. I'm going to go with about 0.55 as that works pretty well for me. I'll need to readjust my player, as he will have got a little confused there, but now when I slide back in and work my way out, he no longer tries to stand up when he can't. You can make little adjustments to try to get that just right, but on the whole, it is working. I could probably go a little larger or perhaps a little higher with the head check. That said, on the whole, it's working, except for one little problem, and that is that now if I come over to a wall and press down, my player now thinks that there's a ceiling, as the check is so large that it's detecting the wall in front of him. This is also a pretty easy fix. I'm just gonna click on the head check here in my hierarchy, and I just need to move it back a little bit so that he doesn't detect the wall in front of him as a ceiling. In my case, that's just gonna be a -0.31, and now he'll stand up just fine, he can jump, and he won't crouch unnecessarily as he doesn't think there's a ceiling there. Alright, so next up we're just going to add sort of an optional improvement, and this is for our slide. At the moment we can cancel sliding by pressing left or right, however it can often send us off cliffs and things because we don't have a ton of control, especially for going into jump. So let's add the ability to exit our slide via jumping. So if we go into our player slide state and then head down to update, we're actually just going to come to the very top, even before our timer ticks down, and we're going to add a new if statement. Here we'll just check whether we are pressing jump and whether there is no ceiling above us. If so, we'll allow our player to change state into the player's jump state. Now, one other thing we want to do here is we want to add an else if in front of our slide timer. That's simply because we don't want the timer to continue counting down once we've jumped, as if you look down in fixed update, if it gets to 0, it could actually halt us horizontally in the air, causing for a purely vertical jump that doesn't allow us to continue moving left or right. So if we add the else, it'll fix that. And with that done, we can now slide and cancel it by jumping. And if you press horizontally while jumping, you can continue to move in that direction, even in the air. Now the next issue is one of the most commonly reported errors, and it's that sometimes when running, the player gets stuck in his jump pose. I'm just going to go to my animator here so that we can see what's going on, and you'll notice that he's literally stuck in the jump animation state. If we click on the transition here, you can notice that he has to get less than -0.1 in order for it to change, and sometimes he just doesn't hit that. So we're just going to change this to 0, and in some cases that change alone will clear everything up. That said, there's still a different problem that comes up. Now, and this is a little hard to reproduce, but if while jumping I continue to hold down the jump and directional key at the same time, he still gets stuck. And as soon as I let go of any of those keys, he'll go back to his normal state. Now the way to fix this is actually in our code. This is the code version of the same problem. In our player jump state, you'll notice that in update, we only leave the jump state if when we hit the ground, our velocity is less than 0. And what if it's not? What if there is some micro velocity going on? And so what we're gonna do here is just change this to a 0.1. That way, if he's standing still and not going up or down at all, it'll still register so long as there's no real upward movement. And since making that change, I've not been able to reproduce the problem at all, so let me know if it happens to you, but that seems to have cleared things up. One persistently annoying thing that's been happening is this idle drift, where if you fall off a cliff and get pushed, or get pushed by, say, opening an item, it sends our player drifting. Again, this is an easy fix. In our idle state, currently we only set our velocity on the X to 0 when we enter the idle state. Let's cut that out of there, head down into update, and actually we're gonna come all the way to the bottom. Now, every frame, we're gonna set our X velocity back to 0, which will keep us from drifting. The reason I'm doing this after all of our if checks is that say we land after a jump and go immediately into the move state, we don't necessarily want to zero out our X velocity. This will allow us to move to that new state before the velocity gets zeroed out. All right, when we head back in the game, you can see that that's actually working quite nicely. No more drift when falling off cliffs or picking up items, that sort of thing. All right, I hope you found this helpful and it's been able to improve your player controller. In the next videos, we're gonna add a player wall jump and wall slide state. Hope to see you in those videos. Until then, this is Matt with Nightrun Studio. Cheers.